just a quick video. And I was at Panda Express, and the girl said she gave me a extra big portion, which is super nice. But me being on the other side of it, portion control is how you manage inventory and how you do just in time. So if people give incorrect portions of food, then what happens is your just in time system doesn't work. You're either they don't give enough and they're being cheap with a portion and they're cheating the customer, truly cheating the customer, and then you end up having too much inventory. And when we do these inventory targets, right? And we have these systems that we put in place so we never run out of things. And we have these margins of error we calculate in. But when things like Chipotle and they use the spoon, that's an incorrect spoon. It's a flat spoon. The spoon should be like they use for ice cream. And they go up to the surface or the top of the spoon. But it's hard when you're talking chunks of meat, right? And this is where Chipotle has a problem. When you're dicing your meat, it's very hard. And it was like us with our pepperoni. Not pepperoni. We could count the slices of pepperoni on the pizza. It was with the cheese and spreading it, and with the sausage, because it was crumpled, and spreading it. Or some places we pinch off pieces. So it was like hamburger meat, the sausage. And you pinch off a piece and you put a piece here and there. And that's all great, but the thing is, it's hard to manage your inventory correctly. And so you end up running into problems. I'll just keep on going. Looks like it's closed. I'll just get it tomorrow. But you run into problems managing inventory. And now say you're Domino's and you're doing this across like a section of stores, or your Starbucks, and they don't count the spills. Like say somebody spills their coffee, and okay, they didn't drop the cup, but they spilled it. They want some additional coffee. You have to log the ounces that you put in the cup. You have to log the ounces. And this is what they don't understand with Starbucks. When you say leave room for cream, that room has to be precise. When they pour out of those, add in almond milk in that, and they just free pour it, it's not on a controlled system. So they're eyeing it to put less in there to leave room. It's what they eye. There's no inside marks on the inside of the cup. But if you do that, you ever been they do this to measure water, like on the side of the ship. Do you ever see some ships, they'll have the markings? And this should be common for ships, both front and back and middle, that they have the striping for container ships and that, and barges. And what does it show you? How far the ship is down in the water. How much of the hull is below the water. So you know that the ship is sitting 10 feet underwater, is the bottom of the bow, or the hull of the ship is 10 feet, or the barge, it's 10 feet under. Why? Because the depth of the water clearance. But the problem with ships coming in and getting grounded is there's no markings. So you can't see how far the ship is in the water. And the markings can be in non-visible colors. The markings don't have to be invisible marking, like yellow or something where people can see it. It can be a marking that's clear, that's in invisible ink. So you have special lenses and you can see how far the ship is sitting or the barge is sitting below. And the reason is you can tell if they're in a channel coming ahead, like going down the Chicago River. The barge is sitting 15 feet under. And that section of river, the bottom is only 10 feet. From the top to the bottom, it's only 10 feet. The ship or the barge is going to run aground. It's 5 feet too low. So how do you do this? Well, inflatable air balloons. You say, what? Oh yeah, you know balloons that take people up into the sky? Well, you attach it to the ship or the barge on the side, and the balloons go upward. Now, you're going to worry about high winds in that, because the balloons will get blowing. But the balloons can be coated with, well, if you put them non-drag, because you want atmospheric density below it, so sometimes zero drag is not a good thing, because you want the particles to stick. So remember that. Sometimes zero drag is actually the wrong thing. Like if you're falling out of the sky, you want to slow down, you need atmospheric drag. That's why the ship has the heat shields. So the particles slow down the ship on re-entry. But the problem with the moon, when you don't have an atmosphere, well, there's no drag. So landing on Earth is not like landing on the moon. Landing on the moon, you're landing in a zero drag atmosphere. So it is totally different. Your ship comes down much faster. So that means you need much more thrust. Oh, it takes a lot more power to land on the moon than it does Earth. Because with drag, it helps create buoyancy, slowing down the ship. So there's a problem with zero drag. So again, there is times when you want drag and there's times when you don't. So landing on the moon is landing in zero drag. And the moon does have a weak gravitational field. And so that gravitational field could be a benefactor or pull you into the moon quicker, depending on the structural makeup of the ship. It could cause, the gravitational field cause buoyancy, or it could be drag, pulling you in. So it's very tricky when you're landing on a planet with no atmosphere. Landing on Mars, you have the opposite, and you tend to have a denser atmosphere. So you'll need less boosters and everything to land, because the atmosphere will create more drag. But if you're using drag, then landing on Mars, you need greater heat shielding, because you're going to have more atmospheric drag. And more atmospheric drag creates more friction. So as you study reentry, you have to study the density of the altitude, each altitude, as the ship reenters, and look at the heat shield and how much drag is the heat shield is getting applied to it, so you can start calculating for different atmospheric densities and how they will affect re-entry or lift. Getting off of Mars is going to be a serious issue. We're talking traditional launches, which I disagree with, where I believe you just cut through the atmosphere and enter on an angle. But we do these vertical lifts and vertical landings, and getting off of Mars is going to take a shitload of energy. Getting in, it helps you. It slows you down. It makes for a softer landing. But also, if there's wind shear or something, it's going to push the shift drastically because of the density of the atmosphere. So if there's any windstorms on Mars and that riptide, that atmospheric riptide, that crosswinds can be devastating. It could even break up the ship. So that creates a problem, but it's a benefactor in making it easier to land on Mars because the atmosphere. But taking off, you're going to have serious problem. And taking off in high winds, high crosswinds, you're going to have even a greater problem. High atmospheric density, then high crosswinds. It's one to blow you sideways and you're trying to go out. Instead, if you do an angular takeoff and you use the crosswinds to let you move through the atmosphere to propel you, it's a tailwind. Like, I found out about this flying from Los Angeles to Chicago, the jet stream. Now, I took atmospheric science and so on multiple times, reading. I taken multiple atmospheric science. I was a chemistry major, so on, the start. So, but the first time I heard about the jet stream is when we were coming from Los Angeles to Chicago, and the pilot announced we're going to be early. Now, what the pilot could have done is save fuel and cut his speed. Showing up early is not a good thing. Planes have to get into the gate, get out of the gate, and being early, the plane should have cut the speed. Save the fuel. Truly, save the fuel so when they get on the ground, they don't need as much fuel for the next leg. So it's a way to save fuel. But we landed 15 to 30 minutes early, which creates problems because they're stacking tin and they need you to show up at the time you're supposed to show up. And they're supposed to be managing it down to the minute. The pilots, to the freaking minute. They shouldn't hit the landing and lining up. They shouldn't hit to their time. Like, it's 10:05 and they're supposed to be there and they should show up at 10:05. There's no excuse for them not to be perfect. They can have a window of 1 minute, 10:04, 10:06. So it's a 2-minute spacing. 1 minute early, 1 minute late. But they can control the engines. And they should never be showing up early or showing up late. So they can stack tin properly, as they call it, at O'Hare or Midway and that. The planes come in and they can get them out. And what do they need to know at O'Hare Airport? They need to know the occupancy of the plane. Not only occupancy with passengers, They need to know how many passengers had carry-ons. Why? How much weight is going into overhang, and those bags need to be positioned above the passenger. Instead, people putting their bags wherever, the bag has to have a certain size. It has to have a certain dimension to go on the plane now. So it fits in the overhead bin correctly. So it stays above your seat. So you got 3 people in an aisle. You have 3 bags. Each of them have their own dedicated space. And they need to label those spaces on the overhead A, B, A1, B1, C1, as an example. Say that's the first row of seats. And then the second row of seats, and the 3 overhead, again, it's A, A2, B2, C2. And then the row behind it, A3, B3, C3. And you can only put your bag in that space. Why? Because we're figuring center of gravity for the plane. And they have to weigh the bag. Now, people are going to take things out of the bag, like their laptop and so on, and you ask them at the gate. Truly. So the trays can have pressure sensors. When they put them down, they put their laptop, and those overhead bins have to have weight sensors. Now, what is this for? Security, too. Because you weighed the bag going in, and everybody getting on the plane needs to be weighed. Truly, your food and drink has to be declared. If you're taking on a beverage or taking on food, you have to declare that, and that has to be put aside separately, and then they weigh you, and then they weigh the food and drink. They have to have scales at the gate. And this is for a train or anything else. Why do you have scales? Why? Because you want to make sure that people aren't bringing things on they shouldn't be bringing on. They checked in. When they check in, they declare, and right at the thing, right at the exception desk, they just stand on the scale. If they have a coat or whatever they're wearing, they wear that. When they get onto the plane, they have to put back on their coat and that, and they step up where they have the ticket, they check the ticket, and they facial recognition, they biometric recognition, because voice too. Hi, Mr. Olson. And they say, what? Hi back. Please respond to the gate attendant. How's your day? Good. It's voice recognition, and they take a voice sample. So everybody, they get a voice sample. And what do? They store it in their digital database. This is anti-terrorism. United American and that build their own databases. This is aviation security. And so when that person gets on again, in China, say, they got off and you have everything, and they say, whatever, hello, Mr. Olson, and he says, hi, how's your day? Good, looking forward to the flight and getting home. And the voice recognition system analyzes the voice and says, not a match. But the ID says it's Mr. Olson, and the picture on the ID matches the guy, but the biometrics don't match. And if you understand this, and let me explain this further to you, we have a problem with people changing names. And this is immigration. They come from Mexico, and their name is Jesus. Here it's Jesus. Is the proper pronunciation in English is Jesus. Literally, they're calling themselves Jesus. But the problem is, if they change their name, it's hard to track them back internationally. And this is the problem when you do name searches. And I would put this here, but I already did this through artificial intelligence as well. And so when people come here from South Korea and they change their name from what it is in South Korea. Now, my ex, Jennifer Kim, she was born here. Her name is Jennifer Kim. But I have Korean friends that use an American name and their Korean name is different. And sometimes it's not the same. They choose a different American name than what their Korean name is. And so it's hard to track people. And this is why biometrics need to be used by all law enforcement globally. The International Association of Police Chiefs creating a standard. And so we have to move to biometrics, whether you want to or not. With these people changing names and that, it's hard. And so when they sign on to Facebook, Facebook says, need your thumbprint. Truly, Facebook says, need your thumbprint. The phone recognizes, and the app, already all the apps use, like my bank apps, they use biometric recognition. Facebook app uses it. And you can't open the app until the biometric. So you press it, so somebody can't be in your phone and open the Facebook app. And you use a different finger. You use a different finger. You can use your pinky, you can use any finger. You can have your thumb be the one that opens the phone. And then use a different finger. Now it gets confusing, but not really. You can just use one different finger for all the apps. Now somebody could watch and see what finger you're using. Okay, but still they need different. And the thumb recognition the biometric should be on the left and right hand. It should be on both sides of the phone. On my phone, it's only on the right-handed. How about if I'm a left-handed person? It should be on both sides. Plus, if I want to use the left thumb instead of the right thumb, or maybe I want to do biometric tap. I scan the right thumb, I scan the left thumb, then I have to scan the right thumb again. Multi-factor identification. Multi-factor identification with thumbprint. But you have to have it in the right combination. I could go right thumb, left thumb. Left thumb, right thumb. Left thumb, right thumb, left thumb. So again, this creates security. But maybe I want the thumb and the index finger, or the thumb and the pinky. And so I go pinky on the left hand, left thumb, right index finger, right pinky. So the biometric scanner on both sides of the phone should be, or in the center of the phone. But that takes away screen space. But again, this creates very big difficulties for hackers, because you can hack into the phone, but now you have to get into the individual things. And I want a safe world. I want to make it unbelievably impossible for people to steal other people's information. So just by the nature of things, it gives natural security where these people can't violate people. And you can use them for computers and tablets. Even on the computer, you can get a biometric pad for your computer. And you can do finger recognitions for the different apps. So, again, it's theirs.